Bite me, Monsanto. We were born to raise a fuss. Bite me, Monsanto. You ain't heard the last of us. You're probably wishing we would go away, but today was such a very nice day, and we're just here to say we're not afraid of you. We're not afraid of you. Oh, we're not afraid of you when we sing, bite me, Monsanto. We were born to raise a fuss. Bite me, Monsanto. You ain't heard the last of us. That's right. I think your products, they really blow, and it's high time for you to go, 'cause you're still pushing those GMOs, and we're so ashamed of you. We're so ashamed of you, you bad boys, we're so ashamed of you. So we say, bite me, Monsanto. Well, I was born to raise a fuss. Bite me, Monsanto. You ain't heard the last of us. I wonder how you sleep at night. Roundup kills my appetite. Creating jobs won't make it right, not ever. Well, I was reading something on a blog about three-eyed cats and human frogs and hairless sheep and flying dogs. Well, aren't you clever? Bite me, Monsanto. Well, I was born to raise a fuss. Bite me, Monsanto. You ain't heard the last of us. Yes, I'm talking about that Frankenfood that puts me in a very strange mood, and your philosophy is uber rude. We want no part of this. Oh, I don't eat Frankenfish. Woo! It's not my favorite dish, so let's say, bite me, Monsanto. But we were born to raise a fuss. Bite me, Monsanto. You ain't heard the last of us. Can't you see the consequence that killing pollinators makes no sense? And if getting rich is your defense, then we'll keep the pressure up. Oh, we'll keep the pressure up. You bad boys, we'll keep the pressure up. One more time. Bite me, Monsanto. We were born to raise a fuss. Bite me, Monsanto. You ain't heard the last of us. You ain't heard the last of us.
That was awesome. I'm going to be singing that one for a while. Woo! Well, to finish things off, we're going to be hearing from Bill Barrett from Planet Bean. Now, a lot of our members are already quite familiar with Planet Bean, as that's the organic fair trade coffee that gets them through their day. But there's a fair bit more to tell. Bill founded the organization, and it's not his only co-op endeavor. He's actually currently working on a new enterprise that's going to be sourcing organic fair trade cotton garments directly from developers that live in India. So we're going to get Bill on stage to have a word. But first, I've really got to take a picture of our awesome turnout for this first event. I'm going to tweet this. Terrific. All right, let's bring Bill up on stage.
Hello, everyone. to greet a room of cantankerous cooperators. Huh? Do you think I can use that? Is that okay? That way I can get out of the spotlight. Check. Oh, there, listen to that. Great. So let's move on to the first slide. So Planet Bean got started in 1997. And we bought a little coffee roaster, which is that gizmo in the middle there. And what we were doing was a number of things. The first thing was reestablishing an art form that had existed in all of our communities across Canada about 60, 70 years ago. And that's the art of coffee roasting. Back in the day, you had a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker, and a coffee roaster. So green beans would be imported. Oh, this is going to be fun. Green beans would be imported into Canada, and then coffee roasters would buy them. And they would roast that coffee weekly or daily. And that way you had really fresh tasting coffee, amazing tasting coffee, just like you had fresh bread and freshly butchered meat. Now, we went through the industrialization of food that came out of the 50s and into the 60s, and what we gained in efficiencies and profit, we lost in flavor and decentralized control of our coffee making, along with everything else that got industrialized. Bread, all sorts of foods became industrialized. So in the late 80s, early 90s, there was this movement that started on the west coast of the United States of little coffee roasters popping up. And I mean, the origins of Starbucks is from this particular movement. The specialty coffee movement began. And so what happened was all of a sudden, if you were roasting coffee in a town, just by the fact you were roasting fresh coffee meant that you had the best coffee tasting in town. And so we had our little roaster in a cafe downtown, and every morning we'd be roasting, and people in the city could smell us in the downtown area, so you'd know we were roasting. And they'd come and they'd say, wow, what's that smell? And they'd buy their coffee. And so we reestablished that lovely art form. One of the things that we also did was we decided that we were only going to buy fair trade coffee. Next slide. So in 1998, we became one of the founding organizations of what was then Transfair Canada, what is now Fair Trade Canada. And so this is the mark that Fair Trade uses now, and it should be familiar with you. And the interesting thing about that mark and fair trade in the case of coffee is that most of the people that we buy our coffee from are organized in cooperatives. So that, in the case of coffee, is also a sign for cooperatives. So when we signed that agreement with Transfair Canada in 1998, we had some producers with us, because connecting consumers and producers is really important to us in terms of our message. Next slide. So we started out, first we had our in the roastery in the coffee bar, and then we moved out because we decided to focus a bit more on wholesale. So we moved our roaster into a tiny little shop and started roasting, and didn't do a whole lot of brewing, but we did a bit. Next slide. And that's the first sort of iteration of our logo, and this is just for fun, so next you can see our slow evolution of our logo. Next. So as well as being fair trade, all of our coffee is certified organic. And our organic certification goes from our production facility, so our roaster, to our packaging machines, to our grinders, even to our retail outlets. So if you come into one of our retail coffee bars and you have a cup of coffee, that cup of coffee has been brewed either through an espresso machine or a brewer that is also certified organic. So up until the point that coffee touches your lips, it's certified organic. Once it touches your lips, it's game over. We all know that. And so the other thing that makes us a little weird is that we're a worker co-op. We're owned and operated by the Sumac Community Worker Co-op. So we've talked about consumer co-ops in the form of MEC, and I could talk a lot about producer co-ops because all of our farmers organize themselves in producer co-ops. But we're a little weird in the fact that we're a worker co-op. And so the workers own the business. And I can get into more details around that later if you're interested, but let's just get back to the core message here. So the next. So these are our happy roasters, and we expanded. They're usually look that way before they've had their first cup of coffee. But we bought a bigger machine so that we could do more volume, and also so we could have more control. So now we have one of our roastery is actually attached to one of our coffee bars. Next slide. So we have 3 coffee bars in Guelph, and one of the things that we've decided to do is, because we don't see ourselves as an international or a national coffee business, we see ourselves as a regional-based coffee company. So we began marketing ourselves as Guelph's Coffee Company. So this is our downtown location. If you've ever been in Guelph, it's kitty corner to the Via station, right across the street from Old City Hall. It's a beautiful location. It used to be the King Eddie Hotel, and back in the day, I used to actually sling beer in this place. Way back, before color photography. But it's a beautiful location. It's our premier location. It's about 2,000 square feet. We do all sorts of cool events in there. Next slide. And then another one of our coffee bars is in the south end of Guelph, on Gordon Street. And all of our coffee bars feature this, I call it an altar, where we worship the bean. And so we want people to know that when they walk in our stores, we're all about coffee. And so that's like an altar, stainless. It's got features. On this one, it's butternut, the butternut features. So we use local hardwoods that have been reclaimed, and they're just absolutely gorgeous. And so that's where you go when you get your single brew or you get your espresso drink, whatever you like. Next. And of course, we have a wholesale business. And this is Steve and Alex, and they're holding the old bag. We have a new bag, which you're probably more familiar with, but that's the old bag. That was a smiling bean bag, eh? Isn't that fun? It's always a happy bean. So we have about 200 wholesale customers, London Co-op included. We don't sell to any of the big guys. We don't sell to Zehrs or Loblaws or any of that. And then we do that consciously. We prefer smaller businesses. The largest chain we're involved in is Longo's, which is an independent, family-owned supermarket chain in Toronto. But there's about 200 of those, and they range from London Co-op, church groups buy our coffee, NGOs buy our coffee, schools, coffee bars buy our coffee. So it gets shipped out, and within days of it being roasted. We don't warehouse any of our coffee, so you call in, you order it, it goes out, and that's because we want the quality to be retained. So next one. So now we'll get into the funky stuff. And that's our fair trade mandate. So when people hear fair trade, the first thing that comes to mind is that the farmers are getting a fair price. And that's certainly the case. So there is definitely a higher farm gate price. There is a minimum price that's established through a negotiation between the farmers and consumers that's facilitated by the Fair Trade Labeling Organization. And that's the people who give us the mark. So fair trade is an international movement. It has representatives on the producer side, in the case of coffee, so people who grow coffee in those countries have regional organizations that elect members who then go to the FLO assembly, and that assembly has a board of directors, which is 50% made up of producers. And then you have the consumer side, which is Fair Trade Canada, owned by civil society, by you, has its representatives on the Fair Trade Canada board, and then that board also has representation through a regional connection on the National FLO board. The beautiful thing for me about fair trade is that it is non-governmental. This is not the WTO. These are not the creatures of the Uruguay round. This is a civil society, a non-profit organization that's owned by us. No states are involved. We make the rules, and it's value-based. In that sense, it is very much akin to the co-op movement. So, like I was saying, the farmers and the consumers get together and they negotiate the price, and that's a minimum price. And in our case, we never pay the minimum price. We're always paying higher prices for quality of differentials and organics and all these other things. So there's that guaranteed minimum price. Because these organizations are situated within co-ops, they use co-op mechanisms like patronage dividend. And in the case of these farmers from Ethiopia, this is a young girl named Emnet, and what she's done is, her folks have probably been out harvesting, she's done school, so she's bringing those coffees, cherries, to the central processing facility in her village, and those will then be dumped into a vat, and the cherry part will be separated from the green bean part, which is the coffee bean. So they're like the seeds of a cherry, the coffee beans. But before that happens, that basket will be weighed, and she'll be given some money. So she takes money back to her home, cash on the barrelhead. Now, the other thing that will happen is that the co-op that she's involved in will, through various organizations, negotiate a price with us. And so they don't know what that price is going to be when Emnet gets that money, cash on the barrelhead. So when they do negotiate the price, there will be a difference, and it's going to be higher. So once the co-ops have established contracts through the fair trade process with buyers like us, then the farmers will be paid again. They'll be paid the difference. But that's not all. Because these co-ops all work collectively in a cooperative union, they have tremendous economy of scale. So what happens is they get a patronage dividend. And that patronage dividend is after they've done all the analysis of all the purchasing and selling of coffee in the co-op, there's usually a profit. And a portion of that profit goes back to the families. And it goes back to them at the time of the year when they're broke. They call it the lean months, because they're so far away from the harvest and they're all absolutely broke. This patronage dividend is like a small injection of life into their bank. Well, they don't have bank accounts. They can't afford them. These folks are incredibly poor. Obviously, in this case, these folks are from Ethiopia. They're amongst the poorest people on earth. The average wages in Ethiopia, people make about $1 a day. So if you're getting this infusion of cash throughout the year, it really helps you sustain the home economy. And that's what this farm gate price does. It sustains the home economy. So we develop long-term relationships. We've been buying coffee from this cooperative union in Ethiopia since 2000, since they first began exporting to Canada. In fact, we were a catalyst for that export to begin. And of course, there's the organic and quality differentials. Next. Now here's where things really start to rock. Because like I said, there's the family benefit, the farm gate benefit, but then because these organizations are cooperatives, there is this remarkable thing that happens. So the way these co-ops work is usually they're village-based. So each village will have a little co-op. And the co-op will be made up, obviously, of coffee farmers. And each family is a member. So it's not individuals, it's families who are the members. So those people in that village have to manage that business. So they have to become literate in finance, in cash flow, in engaging the market. They have to know how to run an organization. So governance, learning the skills of governance are key in terms of making a co-op work. How do you make decisions? Who can become a member? What's quorum? All those things that we need in order to make an organization work. Now think about it. This is in the middle of nowhere in Ethiopia, where you have a group of people who are sitting down. Some of them may be illiterate. None of them have much in the ways of financial means. But what they're doing is they're getting together and they're learning governance skills. They're teaching each other. They're learning from other co-ops. They're creating a social infrastructure. And this social infrastructure is a key element in civil society. We kind of take it for granted. All of this governance happens around us, and sometimes we participate in it, often we don't. But if you want to develop a civil society in a country like Ethiopia, how do you get to the grassroots to teach them how, or to enable them to learn how to practice democracy? Co-ops. Co-ops are key elements in creating the conditions for civil society to emerge in the third world. This may be a provocative statement, but it's one that I will stick to because I think it's incredibly true. I mean, I did a little thing with the CCA a few years back in Uganda, and I was in the middle of nowhere in West Nile, talking with incredibly poor farmers about co-op governance. And those people, once they got their handle around it, once they learned how to manage finances, would then become engaged in local government, get elected to city councils. And these are not the usual rulers. These are not the people that own the businesses in town. These are not the people with the trucks. These are single moms, poor farmers, who then become engaged, understand the process, and actualize all these amazing things in their communities because they learn how to collectively make decisions. Huh? That's what this is all about. That's what cooperatives fundamentally do, is they teach people how to do that kind of stuff, and they enable them to do that kind of stuff. And they are mandated to include women and young people. So you're doing succession planning through the process, and you're engaging even the more marginalized of the marginalized in your community. So that's all really cool. So then you build this organization, and you start to develop economy of scale. So instead of one farmer having to use a wheelbarrow to carry his coffee to the central spot where it's all loaded, the co-op can buy a truck, and the truck can go around and pick up the coffee. So you develop this economy of scale. And then the other thing that's associated with fair trade that is also very beneficial are fair trade premiums. There's a dime that's attached to every bag of coffee that goes into a special fund that these co-ops use to develop all sorts of cool things. Next. And so that's what I'm going to tell you about here. So I've been to Ethiopia 3 times. The first time was in 2003. And then I met Tasu. He's the old guy with the beard. And when I first met him, his house had a thatched roof. This one has a tin roof, so he's made some improvements of his home economy. And that's only half his family. So coffee originates in Ethiopia. So if you didn't know that, wake up and smell the Ethiopian coffee. That's where it all comes from. And so the Ethiopians have this spiritual connection to coffee, as well as it being a key economic activity for them. So the Oromia Coffee Farmers Union is a union of all of these little primary co-ops. So those are the village-based co-ops. So back in 1999, there were 34 of those primary co-ops. In 2012, there were 217. And that involved over 200,000 members. Now remember, a member is a family. You got anywhere from 5 to 10 people in a family in Ethiopia. So you're talking about potentially 500,000 people participating in these organizations. They don't all participate in fair trade, but 28 of them do. Next. So some of the things that these folks have done since 2002, leveraging their fair trade premium with some of the money that they made from their own coffee sales that's kept back by the co-op to do stuff. Education. They've invested in 25 primary schools with 35 additional classrooms. Next. 3 kindergartens. And during the, and that's okay. 6 high schools, a library, and a teacher's residence. Next. Health. The first time I went to Ethiopia, every village I went to, the farmers wanted to take me to show me their source of water. It's always surface water. They take the water out of streams, they filter it through cloth, They drink it, and their children die because they get waterborne diseases. So finding clean water was key to them. These are coffee co-ops. They're cooperative businesses that have values that inform not only the way they do business, but the way they interact with their community. So as well as health posts and dry latrines, they created 89 clean water projects. Next. The other thing they said, well, we're selling coffee. We got to make sure this coffee is the best in the world. And so they invested in this remarkable state-of-the-art coffee processing facility. The whole facility is certified organic, and it's just phenomenal. And again, these are some of the poorest people on earth who've decided that this is what they want to do. They want to make their coffee excellent so they can make more money through their cooperatives to improve their lives. And a bunch of other things. They built roads, bridges, flour mills, coffee mills, electrical installations, all sorts of stuff. Next. And they created a bank. And this just blows me away. They created a cooperative bank. These farmers created a cooperative bank in Ethiopia, even though there was no cooperative banking legislation. And so they gathered together enough money so that they could capitalize their bank in 2005, so they had $6.4 million, and they've slowly been expanding. And so now there's 77 branches, and they have an impressive 97% loan repayment rate. Organizations that are not co-ops are joining this bank because it's so good. Now, individual farmers cannot join this bank. They don't have enough money. But their co-ops join the bank. Someday, they will be able to join the bank because this is owned by their members, they will figure out ways, using things like phone banking, microcredit banking, ways to get that facility to these rural and remote farmers. But right now, what they needed to do was to create an infrastructure to finance their own inventory. Because if you go back to what I said about MNET, cash on the barrelhead, that money has to come from somewhere. So they invested so that they could spend money and pay the farmers because they knew the farmers were broke. So they knew that if they created a bank, they could pre-finance their own inventory so that then they could pay their farmers cash on the barrelhead when they came with their coffee, as well as all those other things that happened later. And in order to do that, they needed to have the money, so they created the bank. Huh? Next. So as you can see, I'm somewhat passionate about this whole co-op thing, especially in the context of third world farmers. That's how I got into this business of fair trade, was in terms of solidarity. So I'm just going to go back and talk a bit more about Planet Bean. And so we do have a commitment to ecological sustainability. And what we do first is we look at what's called source reduction. So for example, that is garbage. We get truckloads of this garbage. And that's our new cup. Mark, you probably haven't seen that. It's not on the street yet, but again, it's focusing on our local presence. It says Guelph's Coffee Company. But we know that's garbage. It's going to end up at a landfill. Maybe it'll get into a recycling bin. Probably not. Might end up on the side of the road. So we have no control over that cup once it leaves our store. So what you have to do then is look before it gets there. What is the least and most sustainable cup that we, least impactful and most sustainable cup that we can get to come through our doors, because we know once it leaves we have no control. So we've chosen this cup because it has the most post-consumer waste content available, and that comes in the shell that's around it, because technically you can't have recycled content, post-consumer recycled content, in a food grade packaging. So source reduction is one of the ways we analyze ecological impact. And that is one of the reasons why we're committed to organics. Next. So again, when we think of organics, we think, okay, absence of chemicals, pesticides and herbicides. Hopefully we think also of the presence of life-enhancing techniques to grow things. things that increase biological diversity, things that increase the capacity of the soil to retain moisture. That's also a component of organics. And then the other thing we need to make sure is that organic integrity is maintained through the transportation, storage of the product. And so when a truck, our coffee comes through organic farms, on organic transportation in the producer country, goes into an organic certified container, comes to port in Toronto or Montreal or New York, gets loaded into certified organic trucks, is taken to a certified organic warehouse, is trucked to our certified organic facility. So every single step of that chain has to be documented and accounted for to ensure the integrity of that product. If I brought one of our coffee bags in here and put it on the floor, from our perspective, it would lose its organic certification because we don't know what this floor is. We don't know what's going on in this floor here, right? So that's a key element, and that's a value-based thing. Not a whole lot of companies take that step to the point where the barista, when they're handing you an espresso, is actually ending that chain from the farmer picking the coffee all the way through. It's like passing a baton all the way through to the point where they pass you the espresso. The organic certification can be authenticated through all sorts of paperwork. Believe me, we got lots of paperwork. Next. And so that's the organic certification from one perspective, but the other thing that we're really excited about in terms of organic certification is the impact that organic agriculture can have on climate change. And there's interesting research being done on the capacity of organic soils to absorb carbon. And so organic growing techniques can actually take CO2 out of the atmosphere and store it in the soil. Particular techniques, but nevertheless, by supporting the organic movement and pushing for more farmers to use that no-till, carbon capturing, the carbon farmers movement, all that stuff, we need to promote that because we can actually eat our way out of the climate crisis. Isn't that a beautiful notion? Somebody should make a bumper sticker there. Eat your way out of the climate crisis. Yes, that's right. But it's something that we need to start to think about and calculate in the way that we do our business, because all of our coffee is certified organic, all of our dairy is certified organic, and most of the ingredients in our baked goods, because we sell baked goods in our coffee bars, are also certified organic. So we need to quantify that and tell people this and get them excited about eating their way out of the climate crisis. Next. So just a few other things. Anything that you buy in our store has gone through an ethical and an ecological screening process. So we won't sell anything that we don't think we should. If it's made in China, we find out labor practices, environmental policies of the company involved. Local suppliers are key for us. Mark was talking about the multiplier effect. Most of our business, except for our coffee purchases, most of our dollars spent are spent in Guelph. And so that has a huge impact on the economy. And then there's all sorts of fun stuff we do around energy, wastewater, and transportation efficiencies. We're members of the community car share. We have bicycle deliveries. We installed parallel water systems in our 2 coffee bars where we were able to do the renovations, so that when we can get the infrastructure to capture water on the roof, rainwater, and store it in the basement, we'll actually be able to flush our toilets with rainwater. Huh? Haven't done it yet, but we will. But we have the foresight to say, this is going to happen. We got to be able to figure out, otherwise you'd have to tear all the plumbing out. So we've got a parallel water system that enables us to do that. Next. So, just to get broad into what I like to describe as the ecological sensibility of cooperatives. Elinor Ostrom, folks, anybody know Elinor Ostrom? So you should. Nobel Prize winning economist. She did her research on governing the commons. How do you look after fisheries, forests, the common air that we breathe? What's the best way to govern the commons? Should it be a corporation, like the Fraser Institute has discussed, in terms of, you know, owning somebody? If somebody owned the Great Lakes, they would look after it. If somebody owned the forests, they would manage it sustainably. It's one perspective. The other is the state. Well, you know, so much for that idea, maybe. Because often there's collusion there, right? Ostrom, in her research, has come to the conclusion that the best way to govern the commons is through cooperatives, or cooperative-like organizations. There is an ecological sensibility to a group of people getting together and having to decide the fate of a resource that they're all owning and they all collectively share. So that's the ecological what did I say? Sensibility of cooperatives. Please read Eleanor Ostrom. Tell people about her. Go to her website. She's passed away a couple of years ago, but her work is really key in terms of helping us redefine our relationship, not only with the natural world, but with each other. And so the other element of this is the notion of equality. And people are constantly now talking about the haves and the have-nots. And cooperatives, intrinsically, are not cumulative organizations like banks or like transnational corporations that attract capital, like rich people who want more capital. Cooperatives are inherently distributive. That's their power, is that they take and give away. They take and give away. They don't just accumulate and use that as a means of power. So, an interesting book that looks at equality is The Spirit Level. It was written by a couple of folks from the UK, and they've gone through all sorts of really interesting areas, like crime and child welfare and obesity, all these different areas, and they've researched them to look at what are the implications in terms of equality on these sorts of things. And what they've determined is, shockingly, the more equal a society, the healthier it is in all of these areas. And one of the prime mechanisms for ensuring equality is cooperatives. It's not the state, it's not friendly corporations, it's cooperatives. So check out the book, The Spirit Level. Next. So just a few things I'll mention in terms of some of the cool stuff we do in the community. We've got this really interesting relationship with a group of young folks who are marginalized by the mainstream economy because they're different. And so they're called Joe, and we work with Joe to get them jobs doing coffee gigs here and there, and they sell coffee in the library. And we're the catalyst that enabled that to get going, and we look forward to a long, healthy partnership with the Joe folks. Cafe Femenino is an interesting initiative that came out of indigenous women in Peru, where they were not seeing the benefits of fair trade in the home economy because their husbands were doing other things with the money other than bringing it home to the family. And so what they did is they came to us and a few other roasters and said, we'd like to build a channel directly to you with our coffee as women, and we'd like to market it as women's coffee. And it's just flourished. It's been quite remarkable. And again, women, I did a little documentary on YouTube on Cafe Femenino. If you go to the Planet Bean website, you can watch it. But it's just absolutely phenomenal, the stuff that these women have done. And they have gone on. Women who are timid and terrified to speak in front of 3 or 4 people are now community leaders. And it's because of this program, Cafe Femenino. And the other thing that's really interesting about Cafe Femenino is 70% of these women who live in rural areas in the Andes in Peru, they're indigenous women, 70% of these women were victims of sexual violence or physical violence. And so this was part of what they were doing. They were trying to get away out of those cycles of violence. And they learned that in Canada, there were women who had similar experience. And so what they did is they mandated for roasters that bought their coffee to make contributions to local women's shelters, anti-violence actions. So as a result, so these women who live thousands of kilometers away, who have no experience of our world, have created the conditions whereby we give thousands of pounds of coffee to women in crisis in Guelph. And those women drink that coffee and watch the documentary about Cafe Femenino. It's really cool. Next. So ultimately what we're trying to do is put a face to the products that people buy. We want to connect consumers and producers in a meaningful way. And on one of the trips that I went to Ethiopia, I took pictures. You can't really see it there, but I took a whole stack of pictures of people at Planet Bean, roasting coffee, making drinks, packaging, sitting behind the computer. And I took them and I went with my Ethiopian colleagues and we went and we visited the farmers and we showed them the pictures. And it was the first time these folks had ever seen what happens to their coffee once it leaves Ethiopia. And they were like, wow, this is really crazy. Look at the stuff that's going on. Look at these friendly faces. And so then what I did is I had them hold the pictures of our people, and I took pictures of those. So that then when you walk into our coffee bars, you can see that there's a meaningful connection there. That those are actually the children of the people that grow our coffee. And they're holding pictures of the baristas who are working behind the bar. Huh? Isn't that fun? So, next. And this is just a little project that we're incubating. These folks are from Chiapas in Mexico, and they grow coffee, really lovely coffee. One of our members was down there, and they found out that they actually have a roaster there. And that they have the capacity to actually roast and sell coffee into the domestic market in Chiapas. So what we're doing is we're bringing 2 of those folks up to Guelph for a month, and they're going to get like a full training in how to do all sorts of things related to coffee so they can go back and then develop the domestic market. We don't have to do that. We just do that because we share their values. We speak a common language, the language of cooperation. Next. And that, my friends, is the last photo. It's 9:30. I will entertain one question. Better be a good one. Yeah?
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between a worker co-op and a consumer co-op and other co-op you provide?
Yes. So the way you figure out what's going on in a co-op is the adjective. So the adjective describes where the power lies. So in a consumer co-op, like Mountain Equipment Co-op, the power lies in the consumer's hands. So the consumers pool their capital, hire a staff, direct them to do what they need to do. In a housing co-op, the people who live in the co-op control how that co-op is managed and governed. In a producer co-op, obviously the farmers get together. They say, hey, we need a marketing company like Gay Lee that can get our milk to market. So let's build a dairy and all this stuff, right? So in a worker co-op, it's the workers. So it's really weird because you have this strange dichotomy. You're operating a business. You are governed by the rules of business. But that's purpose of that business is to create employment and to actualize potentialities latent in the workers. How's that for a bunch of goo, eh? But to just essentially enable people to work in a place where they feel good about it, where they believe they're doing good, where they share values, and they know there's no man who's taking the cash at the end of the day and buying a yacht. Because what happens in a worker co-op is that if there is profit or surplus, part of that goes into expansion, part of it goes into things like benefits packages, And a chunk of it also goes back to the worker owners, the members, the co-op members, and it's divided equally. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO or the guy who sweeps the warehouse. Everybody gets the same amount. It's divided equally. And that way you're flattening that risky, profity sort of component of business. We do have wage scales. We've got a 3-to-1 wage scale where the highest paid worker cannot make more than 3 times the lowest paid worker. And so that way we ensure that ethical integrity within that structure. This is all decided by the workers. So it doesn't matter if you agree or disagree. You're not a member. The members decide. So boo-hoo to you. We decide what we're going to do. If we decide to take 50% of the profits and divide it up, we're going to do that. If we decide to take a vacation in Mexico altogether, we can do that. But that's the point. The power is in the hands of the workers. It's not in the power of capital. It is against the traditional structure where capital dictates what workers do. We have relationships with capital. We have investors. We have loans. But those investors enter into an agreement with us where we dictate the terms. They don't dictate the terms to us. And so you have to find a particular kind of investor. Somebody who's a little crazy, but shares your values and understands, no, I want to invest in something that's not going to be destroying tropical forests or drilling oil in the tar sands or whatever, right? I want to invest in something that's actually going to create employment that the workers control. Now, that's not to say we all get together and say, oh, what color should we paint the floor? Or, I don't know, what should our hours be? We have rules that govern our business, and those are the traditional rules that govern business. And then, instead of having a labor union representing the workers, we also have a component of our business, the worker co-op component, that talks about what workers need. And those two have to work together. The worker co-op can fire the management of Planet Bean, but they can't fire them for no reason. They have to fire them because they're incompetent. So it's a really interesting dance that we've been dancing for a few years, and we'll continue to dance. We certainly haven't got it figured out. But it's really interesting. It's a very interesting experiment. If we don't all go mad. I can hang around a bit if you want to chat some more, but we'll just wrap up there.
Thank you very much, Bill. It was great to hear Planet Bean's story and to learn a bit more about co-ops, fair trade, and organic, and just the choice of something as small as your cup of coffee can have on the other side of the world. I'm sure some people are going to go home tonight and look at their can of Folgers and feel really bad about themselves. That concludes our night. We'd also like to give another round of applause to Mark, Victoria, Ashley, and Bill, and Margot. Well, we are done tonight. This is the first. We're going to be back here again on, it's the 9th, is it not? On the 9th, with the focus being on organic foods. So everyone, we hope you had a good time tonight. Feel free to speak with the people we have here and take a look at the booths and take some information with you. Thanks again to everyone who was able to make this happen, and hope you managed to make your Monday a little bit more enjoyable.
And that concludes part 1 of the London Speakers series here at Aeolian Hall on food cooperatives. Join us the next time for the second part of the 3-part series. Thanks very much.
T-shirt.